Welcome to the United Wrestling Podcast. My name is Nick Bonanno. I am the producer of wrestling operations for the United Wrestling Network and the senior official. And tonight I am joined by two fantastic broadcasters. First, my co-host for the evening from Championship Wrestling presented by Pro Shingle in Memphis, Tennessee, Dustin Starr. How you doing?
What's up, man? Hey, I love the new fancy title, Nick.
What's that?
You got a couple little fancy titles. I love that.
Yeah, just spicing it up. The what's it called? And of course, the guest this week, who is the featured performer on the push. You've seen him and heard him so many times across all kinds of broadcasts, Mr. Todd Keneley. What's up, TK?
What's up, guys? Great to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, man. I'm just thinking the push video that was produced this week by United Wrestling Network really covered a lot of interesting facts that we just really didn't know about you, Todd, especially starting off with, you don't necessarily hide the football stuff, but I didn't necessarily know that you, had a full scholarship. Say what, I guess what was that going into as a, growing up with sports being such an important part of your life?
Well, it always was important. And I remember, when I was younger, I would go to my older brother he's 3 years older than me. He's 6'6", 300 pounds. And so Wow. He was a few years ahead of me in football. And funny story, I remember going to his, I would be sitting at his practices and like junior All-American Pop Warner type football. And they had the blocking shields, the big, shields that you would hit and work on your blocking in your hands. Well, I saw that as a great ring for my LJN figure. So I was sitting on the sidelines with one of the blocking shields with Hulk and Big John Studd. And awesome. The $15,000 body slam challenge. But yeah, sports. So I always kind of followed in my brother's footsteps and ended up, playing football in youth football. And then we both went to a pretty prominent high school, Mission Viejo High School. It's always ranked in the top 20 or so nationally. But I was always tied. One of the things that I talked about in the push interview that didn't make air was no matter what I did with football, it was always tied to wrestling somehow. So in high school, there's footage of it. If you look me up on YouTube or whatever, if I would get a sack and I'd walk towards the sidelines and break out in a Hulkster pose. You know what I mean? One time I got a sack and Undertakered it up and stood over the quarterback and gave him his last rites. My head coach didn't like that. So I would paint my face. I had black around my eyes. And so it was very theatrical. And so I was always tied to wrestling somehow. But that's, again, and I did train in pro wrestling a little bit right before. So I did go to a junior college before going to USC. And I was training UPW at the time. Rick Bassman had opened up right across from the JC I was at, Saddleback College. So I went in there. I was training with Reggie Parks, who was a female wrestler, wrestled in Japan, big heavyweight competitor. And then I got I had talked to USC and had the opportunity to go there. And I'm like, all right, I better back off this because I don't want to, ruin a potential opportunity. But I was always tied to wrestling. Even at USC, we played in the Sun Bowl. And we played against, which was in El Paso, Texas, my junior year. And we played against TCU. They had LaDainian Tomlinson. And the Horned Frogs with LT ran all over us all day. But a few days before, they had this big banquet dinner with the two teams, with USC and TCU. And one of the things they did was they had a team talent show. And me and a 6'8", 300-pound offensive lineman, Ken Bowen, put on a pro wrestling match. We thought there was going to be a stage, like at least a wooden stage. We got out there, it was just tile floor. But we went through it, and then I scooped up the 6'8", 300 pounds and slammed Kenny Bowen. And then but the next I took like a choke slam and all this stuff, just goofing around. And the next day my whole hip was bruised and I could barely walk for the game, but it was worth it.
Oh boy.
I was going to ask you about that, man, because you and I have talked. Oh, something just happened. But you and I have talked before about football, and you being this big defensive tackle at USC and everything, I figured that would be, instead of being a broadcaster, you would be a professional wrestler, but that landed you in broadcasting. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was always the dream. Like I talked about in the push, I always resonated with the commentary. You have these huge moments, like, growing up, I think of like Hulk and Andre and that stare down, and it is an immense moment, but it's that much bigger with the irresistible force meeting the immovable object, thanks to Gorilla Monsoon. Mick Foley and Mankind getting thrown off the top of the Hell in a Cell is insane. But when you add JR saying, "As God is my witness, he's broken in half. That's it. Yeah. He's dead. That killed him." Those are things that are forever woven into that action. And, I think that really, I really saw that at an early age. And I really loved the commentators of the day. I loved Gorilla Monsoon, even Vince McMahon, like on Saturday night's Main Event with Jesse, just like, "What do we got him? No, he didn't either." He was like, it was always so much energy with Vince on commentary.
Who that reminds me of? It reminds me of listening to you and Dan Joseph over the last year or so.
I was gonna say
they clicked so well that no matter what it was, Dan always had some sort of witty, and then you would come back with him too. It was like you guys were always,
I think myself and Dan at times, it's funny. Like I think Andrew Jasick and I had more of the Gorilla and Bobby Heenan, and I think that Dan Joseph and I had more of the Vince Jesse, because even in that clip in the push where Arquette hits the Hurricane Rana, I'm like, come on, Dan, you got to respect that. And that's why he was a former world champion. It's very Vince, very over the top. Mm-hmm. And then, and then you got Dan. Dan would always be like, I don't know, Todd. Come on, Todd. He was that, I don't know, McMahon. He was very Jesse. So it's like, Todd. Yeah, come on, Todd. And we got to go to bed. Tell him all about it. And so, those things live with you. There's been times like, it was a while ago. Sometimes if somebody's kind of listless and doesn't know where they are and they're just swinging, I'll say on commentary, just almost instinctually, I'll say he's punching at Ghost. And then it was a while I was watching the original WrestleMania main event back, Hogan and Mr. T and Piper Orndorff, and Jesse in that match goes, he's punching at Ghost. I was like, that's where that came from. Now, I don't even remember that from that match, but it just gets, in your psyche. And there's those little things, a lot of Gorilla will come out at me from time to time of golden opportunity for this guy, or bombs away, or lowering the boom on him, or the way Gorilla would dissect physically what was happening to a guy. It all sticks with you. It just becomes part of your fiber, and part of your toolbox when you become a broadcaster.
I remember asking my dad watching wrestling, I said, "Hey, Dad, what's a bread basket?" He'd say, "You hit him right in the bread basket, or in the nether regions," or like whatever terminology that wrestling broadcasters have come up with. I was like, "What is a bread basket, Dad?"
I knew what a lower lumbar region was at 5. You know what I mean? You get a great education through wrestling. How many other first graders knew what a external occipital protuberance was? I did, because I listened to Gorilla Monsoon.
Right. So,
what's it called? You mentioned Jim Ross commentating the Mick Foley moment and all that before. Jim Ross also used to bring up people's football histories a lot. Did that ever factor into I guess your thought process growing up, or even when you got into wrestling, people bringing up people's athletic background?
Yeah, I love that, because I always try and do my research. And it takes a certain type of person to step into, the squared circle for wrestling or any combat sport, boxing, MMA, kickboxing, any of those things, everybody has a story. And I think that it just, look, a viewer, and I was always told this too, you have to tell the story. A viewer at home can see, they know the moves. A fan knows the moves. You can call the moves all day. It's just, it's like a parrot, body slam, side Russian leg sweep, but if you can really tell the story of the person behind the competitor and what they've been through and what makes them dangerous, if you've got a guy Like back in the day, JR would have called his matches, of course, like a Ron Simmons that had that Florida State football background. He does a big, flying shoulder tackle. Well, yeah, that adds so much more to that move because of his time on the gridiron. So I think anytime you can use that in broadcasting, stuff from real life and real athleticism and real background, it adds that layer of legitimacy to it, and it's important.
Yeah, I hear that. So in addition to commentating for wrestling, you mentioned that I don't know if we got into it in the video, but commentating for boxing and for MMA and other things like that. How do you feel like that transition works, or they kind of blend together seamlessly?
I think they blend pretty well, and I think that it's helped me as a broadcaster because, early on I started with UPW back in the day, which is where a lot of people got their start. Samoa Joe was still coming out in a Hawaiian shirt, and John Cena was the prototype, and he was a robot, and, Frankie Kazarian, Christopher Daniels, Victoria, all of these people came out of there. But then UPW branched out and they started Valor Fighting. And I was, the play-by-play guy. And it was kind of like United Wrestling Network. We're a small collective of talented people that do a million different things. And so when we launched Valor Fighting, they're like, okay, yeah, TK is going to be the, the play-by-play guy. I'm like, I've never called MMA, but I know sports and I know athletics, and I knew enough, and they would always put me with a fighter or somebody that would know the real nuts and bolts of the technique. And then that continued to branch out, and I've had great opportunities in MMA too. I worked for Elite XC when they were with CBS and Showtime. I called the undercard fights, and then we turned it over to Mauro Ranallo and Goldberg to call the main card. I did, this was like dreamland. Okay. At one point, I was working on Hulk Hogan's Celebrity Championship Wrestling.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I was like ring announcer for that and worked behind the scenes. So I had worked all week on that, and then flew out to Oklahoma to call the finals of Chuck Norris's World Combat League, which was a team-based kickboxing thing where there was, like a New York team, an LA team. Mm-hmm. They'd have individual fights in individual weight classes, but like an amateur wrestling meet. If you got a win, it went to your overall team score. So I worked with Hulk Hogan and Chuck Norris in the span of a few days. That was a trip. But when it comes to calling that other stuff, and I've gotten more comfortable with it, I think one lends to the other. Calling MMA, I bring a lot of the, the quips and those. You have to be quick on the call. And that entertainment value, and do my back in storytelling. I do my research on the fighters. And then on the flip side, when I call wrestling, when you have a guy that works more of a strong style, for us, if you had like a Bateman who's a great striker, or you had a Russ Taylor that can do everything and does a lot of mat-based stuff, then the stuff that I learned along the way calling MMA, I would bring into my pro wrestling commentary. So I really think it helped to lift me up and make me a better broadcaster just in general, doing both.
And just being able to like carry the broadcast and transition from one segment to the next is something that's really hard to learn too. And doing all those sports, it seems like you would have a lot of experience doing that. But man, you mentioned Hulk Hogan. We can't just do a speed bump talking about Hulk Hogan's wrestling. Little brother, you got to give me a story. Give me a Hulk Hogan story.
Okay. Gosh, there's several, but
I think you told me one with little brother in it or something. Or called
there was one, this was kind of crazy. It's I was working at Impact at the time, and it was lockdown at San Antonio. So we were at the Alamo Dome, and there was legit, 10, 11,000 people there. It was great. And at that time, they would give us they'd give the commentary a full intro, just like, JR would come out to the Oklahoma fight song or whatever. Taz would come out to his music. Tanae would come out. I would come out. And so the night before, there was this big party on Riverwalk in San Antonio, and they had karaoke. And I sang Rock You Like a Hurricane. So when it was my time to come out, the sound tech put on Rock You Like a Hurricane.
Yes.
But prior to that, I'd gotten into kind of gorilla at the top of the ramp, and it was a big walk, and I'd gotten there early. and I was just sitting there kind of having a moment and thinking and focusing. And it's just one of those moments I'll never forget. I kind of had a Hogan, Madison Square Garden, January 23rd, 1984 moment where you see all those garden shows. They always showed Hulk right before he made that left-hand turn and then went through the curtain. And he'd do like the sign of the cross, and he's, doing this and then and then it goes. That was like the open of like Superstars back in the day, Saturday mornings. And when they had Thriller as the music. I don't know how that worked. But anyway, I was sitting there and I was all alone. Tanae and Taz weren't there yet. I'd gotten there early, and I was literally, it was a huge show, and I like said a prayer, and I'm just there, and I was kind of doing this, and all of a sudden I just feel this big canned hand on my shoulder, and I turn around, and it's Hulk, and he's like, he just looks at me and goes, "Getting all warmed up, brother," and it was just a surreal moment because it just took me back to my childhood, and there's my childhood idol, and it was just, and there was no one else around. And it was just that moment between, Hulk and I, and I'll never forget that. But a funny one was I did the Hulkamania tour in Australia in 2009, and it was Hulk and Ric Flair were the main event in every town. We had a lot, yes, and we had a lot of great talent. Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Anderson, Ken Anderson was on that. Umaga, it was his last tour before he passed. God rest his soul. And he and Anderson had a match that I hope gets released at some point, because that tape never really saw the light of day. And they stole the show and that was his last, Eki Fatu, Umaga's last match. It was amazing. But going into the tour, I had written all the formats for the shows. I was doing everything. And Jimmy Hart comes up to me in the hotel, and he's like, "Hey, baby, Hulkster wants to go over creative." Now, I had worked with Hulk on Celebrity Championship Wrestling, done a couple things, but not like to this level of having a lot of control over the show, because that was Viacom, by the way. Because that was Viacom, and everything was micromanaged at Celebrity Championship Wrestling. So Hulkster wants to go over creative, baby. So next thing I know, I'm sitting across the table from Hulk, and Hulk is always Hulk, by the way. Okay, he comes walking in a tank top and a bandana, and glasses up on his bandana and the mustache and the whole bit. And he sits down, and Jimmy, and we're sitting at the table. And I've got my formats for the first show of the tour. And I go through it match for match and how I see it, and, lighting cues and everything else that was on there. And Hulk's just sitting there across the table with him, and I'm thinking the 7-year-old in me is like, if Hulk shits on my ideas, I'm going to be devastated. And we sit there and I go through it, and he's like, "I love it, brother. Let's do it." I was like, "Yeah," and then I'm sitting there, flash forward, I'm on commentary and watching all these things happen. And I'm on commentary for a Hulk Ric Flair match with Eric Bischoff on color. And it was surreal, man. It was surreal. It was total freaking fantasy camp. It was crazy.
Nice stuff.
But let's talk United, right? That's why I'm here.
Man, I know you got some stories, brother, and we've been listening to you. I mean, you have been the voice of championship wrestling here in Memphis for a year and a half now, and you've had a couple of different broadcast partners. You've had Andrew Jasick, you've had Dan Joseph, Blake Bulletproof Troop, man. You guys have really good chemistry too. Who am I missing? I know I'm missing somebody. That's only 4.
Yeah, Blake's a great analyst.
Siliquasto, or
yeah, well, and Jeff Resnick has joined us. He's on there with Blake and I. But in the time of Memphis and championship wrestling, would be that.
So when we first started, we had to learn about the product and not only who the cast of characters were, but who was the narrator that was telling the stories. And just since we're all here and working together and all the fans can hear, man, we love your commentary. The sound bites, like you say, I mean, you could have the best match in the world, but we remember those moments, and those moments really come alive. And just a little spoiler, well, not really a spoiler, but a teaser. This Saturday is our best of Red Carpet Rumble, and a lot of those have some really good Todd Keneley calls in them.
Agreed.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, and that means a lot to me because and you and Maria have just been such a shot in the arm for our overall brand awareness. You guys are so active on social media. The show is great, watching it as it airs on Saturdays and being part of the chat has been a blast.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a huge compliment because I also have the challenge when it comes to the Memphis show that we're really not on camera. You and Maria are doing all the laps, and you guys are threading everything together. So, you hear our commentary, sure, but you never see it. So to not have a name or a face to the voice is even more of a challenge. But I take it as a huge compliment because, wrestling is just one in Memphis. Memphis is just one of those iconic wrestling cities. When you think of Jerry the King Lawler and such, and Memphis wrestling, Jackie Fargo. That's traditional pro wrestling. So for the product to take off as well as it has in Memphis, for the in-ring talent to be as popular as they are with the fan base, and the commentary to be, well received, is a huge compliment because that's a pro wrestling city, and especially with us. I know we had the birthday bash scheduled, and I'm sure the day will come where we'll get our talent out there. But the fact that it has been so well received without us being physically in Memphis is huge, and I can't wait till we can get out there and do it for real.
Hey, you've been following some really good broadcasters too, man. Everybody from Lance Russell, Dave Brown. You mentioned the King. Corey Macklin, a guy that I worked for on the last rendition of Memphis Wrestling, was kind of Vince McMahon, like, big move. But we've had some really good broadcasters here on Memphis television, and you guys have not missed a beat. So it's good stuff.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been great. And the Red Carpet Rumble, that episode I'm sure will be fantastic. And that's one of the things, too, that I think the United Wrestling Network has done a great job of creating its own signature events. In kind of an interesting story, too, the first Red Carpet Rumble was in 2013. I was at Impact Wrestling at the time. I was going to Orlando every single week, but the Red Carpet Rumble came along, and I'm like, I have to do it. So I had talked to David Marquez, and he's like, if you want to do it. I wasn't under any strict contract at the time. I was kind of per appearance. I was trying to negotiate a longer term deal. And so I said, you know what, screw it. And I went out and I called the first Red Carpet Rumble, and what a rumble it was. Mm-hmm. And because if you remember at the time, Percy Pringle, who had a huge impact on our product, had recently passed away. Mm-hmm. And Sean Ricker, Eli Drake, who was under his tutelage on our program, was number one in the Rumble and had come out. So when he was going to make his entrance, Eli Drake was all shrouded in the black cloak and stuff. And they had the soundbite of Percy, Paul Bear, and the, oh, yes! And then Eli Drake sheds the cloak and his music hits. And it was very much a tribute to Percy. And he goes one, till the end and wins the Rumble, which was for the Heritage title. Mm-hmm. And then out comes Russ Taylor, who was the very first PP3 cup bearer. Now, at the time, the cup didn't look like it does now, where it has the base and the trophy and the names. It was the urn. Okay, it was the urn. It was Paul Bearer's urn. So out comes Russ Taylor with the urn, cashes it in for a shot at the newly won Heritage title, and comes up just short. And then you have Eli Drake at the end holding up the Heritage title and holding up the urn, for Percy in tribute. Oh, gosh, just what a moment. So I was glad I was there because there was so much championship wrestling from Hollywood and United Wrestling Network history that happened in that one day. And I'm glad I just said, you know what, I can't turn this down. I got to do it, and called it.
Little tidbit, the final two were Scorpio Sky and Eli Drake.
Yeah, and it was
on the show.
And as you fans, if you don't know, and if you watch this best of, I'm sure you'll see some of it. The Red Carpet Rumble, one of the things that sets it apart from, for say, the Royal Rumble, is when it gets down to the final two, it's pinfall submission. It's a match, and so you had all this great cast of characters that had come out in the first red carpet rumble, and then your final two in a match after going from number one all the way and running running the field is Eli Drake, Sean Ricker, and Scorpio Sky. It's a good way to kick off that blockbuster event, I would say.
For sure.
Absolutely, yeah. So speaking of like kicking off, a thing that we've started doing the last couple of years, or gone back to in the last couple of years on Championship Wrestling for Hollywood or for Arizona, is having what we used to call the table opens. So that's where you see the commentators introducing the show, talking about what matches you might see to help hype up what's going to happen in that episode. At the end of almost all of those, it always ends with Todd sending it to ringside with a fight on. So what's the background of that, or how was the setup with doing table opens? What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's blatantly an homage to my background with USC. Fight on is the mantra of the USC Trojans. And so I remember a while ago, I think it actually started, I was doing some ring announcing for MMA. And, you have Michael Buffer with "Let's Get Ready." I'm not going to say it because I don't want to pay the royalties. You have his brother Bruce with "It's time," but everybody seemed to have some sort of catchphrase. And one day it just kind of hit me. It's like, man, I could say, "And now it's time to fight on." And I'm like, I can pay tribute to my proud background and everything I went through to earn a spot on the USC football team. And it still works. And so that is where that was kind of born. And then I brought it into pro wrestling when we were doing those table opens, which, by the way, are quite the challenge because peeling back the curtain, so when we started taping, we'll tape 2 or 3 episodes of the program. And we do those at the top. Before anything starts, the crowd gets let in, and we do them back to back to back. So the challenge of, in your head, keeping those episodes straight and what matches are happening, is really hard. It's really hard, and you don't want to mess up because you don't want it. The crowd is now sat, and they want wrestling. And if you mess up and take too many takes, they will be vocal and they'll let you know.
Oh my God.
So it's really important.
I was nudging you the whole time, Todd. I was like, what match is that? Because I had scrabble all over my because of the changes and whatnot. I had no idea what was next. I was like, I'm just following you.
Things change, but you'll try and go through them. But it's like so many names and main events and titles on the line, and it's a real challenge to keep it straight. And but it's been a welcome challenge for me because that's been something that in the past was a real challenge and an issue for me. I was flown back to Stamford, Connecticut for WWE a number of times. My first audition for them was backstage at a SmackDown taping in Fresno, California. And the way that worked was there was a monitor set up and a table in the back. And they put me with Taz, oddly enough, who we would work again together at Impact. And they would send the matches, from the truck, and he and I would call them, and we did. So it started with commentary, and I'm really comfortable with commentary. So we called, I think, 3 or 4 matches, and then we did stand-ups together. And I was comfortable already because I called the matches, and it went well. And so I do stand-ups, and that goes well. So I'm thinking, man, and then they had me listen to the show on headset to where I could hear the producer notes to the talent, to, Michael Cole and Taz at the time, to get a sense of the pacing, or to, count down into replays or countdowns into breaks. So I was feeling extremely confident. And then a few weeks go by, and I get a phone call to fly out to Stamford. And I'm thinking, man, I already auditioned, right? I got this. I'm going out there to sign on the dotted line, and I'm living the dream. This is it. So I go out there, and that wasn't the case. They put me in the studio, the studio where you see all those, raps happen. And the big camera on a jib comes down and the red light goes on, and it was Michael Cole and I to do a preview for SummerSlam. And I was like, and just shaky and deer in the headlights. And, you know, I can't explain it. Like, I've done so many shows and live events and called stuff live, and I don't get nervous. But there was just, I think it's when everything's on the line and your dream's on the line, it was just something overcame me, you know, and then went on and did commentary, and that went well. And they flew me back a couple times and just like never pulled the trigger. So when it came to have the pressure being put on, so that was always, I think subconsciously, I had kind of a fear almost of doing on-camera opens because of that. And so when I did come back around to Hollywood, and that was a big part of it, because prior to that, we weren't really on camera much unless you came to us at the table. It was kind of like, you know, oh man, okay. But I got really comfortable with it, you know? And so that was the thing too. It's like after that WWE experience, my start with Impact was I got an email from Bruce Pritchard saying, hey, can you come back Thursday? We're going to do a little audition with you in Orlando. I'm thinking, audition. So I go back and I go to the creative meeting, and Eric Bischoff's there, who I've worked with, Hulk's there, all these people, D'Lo Brown. And they're like, hey, everybody, this is Todd Keneley, and he's calling the first hour live with Jeremy Borash. I was thinking, oh, no. So if there was ever a time to be nervous, it would have been there. JB and I had never worked together, but we talked throughout the day, and then boom, we go live. My first match was a X Division title match with Rob Van Dam and what was it? It was DJ. God, I don't know, but anyway, I know it was an X Division title match, and it went well. And we did an on-camera open from the desk, and everything went fine. And it's like, wow, what was that WWE curse? You know, but like I said in the push, man, you can't have your ups without your downs. And immediately after, I left Impact, United had reached out, and I was like, came back that next Sunday. So I think my last show was like June 2nd, 2013 at Slammiversary. I'm coming off. I called AJ and Kurt Angle, Sting and Bully Ray for the title was my last match. And I got released. I'm like, what do I do now? Like, I mean, when I was there and I was really happy with my work, I'm thinking, this is my career now for the next 10 plus years, right? And then it went down the way it did, and United immediately reached out, and they're like, there was a tweet like, welcome back TK, and it allowed me to get right back on the saddle. And that next show was at Commerce Casino, and I remember the one match I definitely remember being on that taping was PP Ray and Rock Ness Monster's steel cage match. You know, it felt big. So it was like a huge confidence booster, and definitely very therapeutic to be right back. And United's always been a home.
You know, doing the stand-ups with you and Dan, it's hard to, first of all, keep a straight face when I was up there doing it. And second of all, it was kind of weird. I had to wear the same outfit 3 shows in a row.
No, you had brought changes for days. Like, we don't have time for this 5-star.
I think I had outfit changes, I think, and it was like, oh no, we don't have time for that. I was like, oh, okay, well, let's just do it.
Yeah, well, because those opens, I mean, and then there were times we would do English, and then we also have a Spanish language version of the show. So then they would go on and do theirs, and then for a while, Dave Marquez was doing Houston and doing interviews and stuff. So there were times where, I mean, it was 20 minutes, you know, and that's why again the pressure was on to hit it first take, because you just don't want to lose the crowd. And the crowd, you know, God bless them, are up and chanting and holding up signs and going crazy and give us that incredible atmosphere at the start of our TV. But you can only ask for so much, and you don't want to push them so hard that then when the time comes and we got some great action, they're just too exhausted to react. But that's television, you know. That's TV. That's the way it works.
And speaking of the fans, so we had Stu Stone on a couple days ago, and in the chat, people were quoting direct quotes from Stu, and I was trying to verify if he had actually said anything. He said people come up to him on the street also and things like that. What kind of interactions do you have with fans, either at Ocean View Pavilion or out in the world?
Yeah, you know what? I've had great reactions with fans, and that after I've had people tell me, like, after the shows at Ocean View, that they love watching the TV because they love hearing the commentary, and have, I know you guys like this thing, oh, it's the voice of championship wrestling from Hollywood. But I've had fans really say, like, you're who I associate with the TV product, because you're the voice we always hear, and you're the one telling the stories, and so that means a lot. I love getting that validation and interaction. But even more importantly to me, and this was another thing that I mentioned in the interview that didn't make the final cut, is more than anything, what I really take as a compliment. I love to hear it from fans that they like my calls, and it's amazing. But when I have the talent that's going out there and that is putting their bodies on the line and physically doing what they're doing, for our audience and for our product, and when they come to me, and this has happened quite a bit, and they're like, man, you really added so much to that match, and I love the way you called this, or I love the way you called that. And there's been times where on the fly, I'll get with talent before, like, well, any signature stuff you might hit or you might go for, well, I do this, but I don't really have a name for it. And sometimes just in the heat of the battle, and as you're calling, your brain's constantly, like, Dustin, you've done commentaries, you probably know. I think people take it for granted, especially if you call like a 3-episode taping. It's exhausting.
Yeah, it's
exhausting because your mind is constantly going. I do my research in terms of the talent, but I don't pre-produce stuff I'm going to say. I call it on the fly because you have to, because things change and you want it to be organic. And so your brain is constantly going. I've also worked like at the Improv Comedy Club where we did Coastline Clash, and I see comics all the time, and they go up and they do maybe a 45-minute hour set, but a lot of it is pre-rehearsed and it's in their brain. They have their set built. But for us, it's all just on the fly. So after 3 hours of that and keeping your energy up, and I'm first and foremost a wrestling fan, so it's not canned. I'm really excited when there's a big move or a close call or a near fall. I'm excited, and at the end of the day, you just are dead. You're exhausted.
Yeah.
So when the talent says, "Hey, I really love," or I come up with a name for their move or something, it's awesome. This is a funny story, if I may. So it was at Impact Wrestling, and it was in Chicago, and Kazarian and Daniels, who are two of my longest tenured friends in the business, that day for a while they were doing Throwback Thursdays every so often, and they would dress up, costume or whatever. So they were dressed to the T as Hawk and Animal, as the Road Warriors, but they were the Legion of Boom. The face paint, the pant, everything, gear was perfect, like everything was perfect. But they were the Legion of Boom. And and at the time, Daniels used to do this thing where he would like shake his ass, and Kazarian would like point at his ass and stuff. Like Daniels is very, very just animated. And so I said, "Who is Hawk?" And Kazarian was like, "CD is Hawk." I'm like, okay. He's got to end the promo with, what a tush. And the second I said it, Kazarian doesn't say a word. He just bolts down the hall. I don't see him till they come out. And then sure enough, they cut a whole promo as Legion of Boom, and what a tush. CD's shaking around and Kazarian's pointing and the crowd pops, and it was like, yes, it's one of my proudest moments. But yeah, sometimes you get to take license and be creative too on commentary. Sometimes the talent doesn't, that light bulb doesn't always go off for them. And somebody that sits back and knows the characters probably better than anybody, sometimes we're the best sounding board on what might work.
That's a good question too. Is I've always thought that a lot of those lines might be scripted because maybe just in preparation you think, oh well, maybe I'll say this to close or maybe I'll say that to close. But when we talked about this previously, you really don't. You just say what you feel at that moment. And to me, that's really, really just impressive because, you know, if you don't get it right that first time, it doesn't happen again. You don't get a second shot at it. It's live.
Right. So. Yeah. It's live, pal. But yeah, you know, I like it being organic, and that's the thing that's fun too. And again, your mind is going a million miles an hour, and I don't want to, like, you know, toot my own horn, but like I honestly get a kick of watching the shows back, because when you're in the moment, you don't remember everything you say, and 9 times out of 10, like, it'll surprise me. I'm like, man, where did that come from? You know what I mean? Like, you always have your kind of go-tos that you go to for certain situations, and it's kind of formulaic that way. But every once in a while, just, you know, you're going. I mean, we're live to tape, but I call it as if it's live.
Yeah.
And it's like whatever comes out, and you throw a lot of stuff at the wall. It doesn't all stick, but for me, I've had pretty good success of, you know, like, oh man, that was all right. I don't know how I came up with that, but it was good.
You mentioned a moment ago about how, like, when you're excited for something, that is genuine excitement because you are a fan. A thing I think is super important that you also do is when you're heartbroken or very upset about something that's happening in the ring, it comes through just as much. An example that comes to mind was the Ray Rosas winning the PP3 Cup this year. As you know, before the decision's getting made, you start kind of seeing for the audience, it's like, wait a second, what's happening? No. Oh, and the decision's made. It's a disqualification, not like this. Yeah. And it was like,
disgusting. Sorry, Nick.
No, please. Like, it's a quite memorable moment. Take it away. Like,
I think pissed off whiny Todd's pretty hilarious.
The Zicky Dice attacking Gentleman Jervis. Oh, that's disgusting. Get the camera off of him. We shouldn't be looking at this anymore. I love it.
Yeah, we go to break there, like, with a camera whip. It was it felt very, very real, but that's because of, like, almost like you're like, go to break, you know, go to commercial or something, old timey TV, like, so.
Yeah, no, and honestly, it's not fabricated. Like, I'm still a wrestling fan, and when I see somebody like a Jervis that's impossible not to like, getting completely dissected and decimated for really no reason other than to make a point, I really think that on commentary, it's like I revert back to that kid and wrestling fan and just say the things that come to mind. And I mean, I really feel it from the heart, you know, I really do.
Sometimes sorry, Nick, sometimes there's a clip, and this is like insider social media stuff, and you want to clip that move because you want to, like, put it on Twitter or, you know, show it off for the show or whatever. But you only got 15 seconds, but then your call might be 17 seconds. And so I'll adjust it just for your call because it's so good sometimes. And like Nick is saying, even if it's a sympathetic or if it's an excitement or something like that, it's like, no, we got to stay for the full clip of Todd calling what's happening. If that makes any sense, what I just said.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, like, I think it's something that just I've learned to do over the years is I always kind of have it in my mind of talk in sound bites. You know, I try and call moments and moves and stuff so that I think subconsciously I know that at some point this is going to get cut into a history package. I mean, when I'm calling, I don't really think that way, but I think I've learned to do it. You make the big statement and then you kind of back out so that you give them those short beats that you can cut into those history packages, you know?
Absolutely. I appreciate that greatly, as I am one of those people going back to make those video packages. Yeah, like, so many times you hit a line and then someone steps on you immediately, so it's like you have to fade out real quick, or just like it doesn't work. So I have noticed that you let moments breathe like that. Is a little breath of air that was for when there is a strong call or a strong moment like that. So that's not gone unnoticed. So thank you.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring it up. And big shout out to the chat. We've got Steve Christian. I know he's in the Mississippi area. And then Jonathan, he's a big fan. He supports Championship Wrestling. He says, excellent. Jonesboro, Arkansas is in the house. And this dude wears a mask, like not just a mask over your face. I mean, like, he wears a mask over his head, like a hood. That's Jonathan. That's his gimmick.
Well, we've got some interesting fans in California too. There's one guy that comes with a giant hammer, like a Thor hammer.
Right.
So we've got our own cast of characters, But one thing too that I didn't get to really talk about, and I'll try and show this. So on the push was it is just how much of a family the United Wrestling Network has been, and you've have become a big part of the family too, Dustin and Maria, and it really everybody. There's really not egos, and that's what I think is so refreshing. Is you always hear these horror stories of everybody's out for themselves in this business, but I really think we've kind of taken to heart the monocle of the little engine that could for United Wrestling Network. And so, but for me, it really was kind of family. I've worked with David Marquez for going on 20 years plus. And so, but in terms of family, and I know you have another little one on the way, Dustin, but my son Jack was born in 2005. And then we kind of kicked off the Galaxy tapings in 2009. And then there was Showcase Theater. And so my son was at these tapings and kind of grew up with a lot of the guys,
Nice.
And little things like I remember one time, I think it's when we were in Glendale, there was a Scorpio Sky, Willie Mack street fight for the United Television title. And they had a legendary feud for that title. It was a signature feud for both of them early in their career. And of course, they've gone on to great things. But there was a moment where, and Jack was sitting always right next to me, and Willie Mack threw Scorpio Sky along the side of the ring and into the bleachers, into the chairs. And all of a sudden, I am because you're taught to call for the monitor. All of a sudden, I see Jack is at the far ring post, sitting there like looking around and watching and like clapping. And he was like 5 years old. Like, what are you doing? And then you see him turn around, and I'm sitting there at the commentary table, like, get back. And then you just see him sprint like back towards hard camera, but Jack just like grew up with it. And then one of my favorite stories is we were at the Showcase Theater, and this was when Percy was with us. And, Jack had watched a lot of wrestling, but primarily more old school stuff. So he had seen a lot of Paul Bearer era Undertaker. Okay. And so we're turning the corner to go backstage. Jack's right by my side. He's, tiny at the time. And out comes Percy and just right in front of us. And Percy puts his hand out to my son and goes, "Hi, son, I'm Paul Bearer." Introduced himself as Paul Bearer. And Jack, my son's just like awestruck and like shakes his hand. And then backstage is one of my favorite pictures. I don't know how well it will show up, but one day the urn is backstage. I'm like, Jack, you got to take a picture. And he was so scared that Percy was going to come around the corner that he makes the face. So I don't know. You can see him there in his T-shirt, and he's got the urn, and he's just like, I don't really want to be doing this. But it was, it was a family affair for me. My son grew up with it, and it really is a family. And I can't wait till we get back to doing live production because I miss the guys and girls so much. And it's going to be great to get back.
Mike Coughlin with some more.
Yeah, sure, Mongoose. Yes, my ego's enormous. Yeah.
Hey, speaking of getting back, what have you been doing during the pandemic? What's keeping you busy? Have you been able to call any action or anything?
I've gotten to do some of the stuff, some of the wraps for our version of Championship Wrestling in Hollywood. I've gotten to sit in on some of the tapings for the push and kind of ask some questions, which has been really fun. I just think, everybody top to bottom, from you, Nick, and John Roberts, finding some of the old archival footage, and Logan, it's just, I think, and the talent themselves have really opened themselves up. I just think those pieces have been so great. So I'm so happy that positive has come from the negative. Yes, we're not at Ocean View Pavilion putting on matches right now, but I think we've brought our fans closer to our talent and the characters and the people that work so hard for this company than ever before. So I've been involved, heavily in that, and just trying to stay busy, and just watching as much as I can. I love the Heritage Hall and watching those old matches and reliving some of the 10-year plus history of this company, and just enjoying doing homework to be ready when we come back.
So as we're starting to wind down here a little bit, 2 questions for you, Todd. Do you have any commentary pet peeves? And do you have any favorite kind of cliches or tropes that you go to?
I want to hear this. Pet peeve.
Commentary pet peeves.
Talking over the ring announcer, right? I did that plenty of times.
Talking over the ring announcer, and I've been guilty of it too. But those entrances are a big moment, and you're gonna have your time to fill information in and tell story. But entrances are huge. I mean, if you look in the history of this business and you look at guys like The Undertaker, entrance is like half of it, and so you don't want to squander that. And so that would be one thing. I think just conversation for the sake of conversation and bannering, commentators putting themselves over almost more than the product by themselves bickering and not focusing on what's going on in the ring, because at the end of the day, that's what we're there, is to help push those stories forward. So that bothers me. I was taught early on, like, you have to call every single cover. So you'll work with some guys that maybe are greener, that a guy will go for a pin or a quick roll up, and they'll finish their point, but that could end the match. You know, and you have to take it seriously. I mean, a commentator not calling a cover would be like Nick not going down for the count when somebody makes a cover. Like, it's a cover.
Sure.
The match could end. So that's a pet peeve. In terms of like go-to calls, I don't know. I have a lot. I have a lot of gorilla-isms, like I've said. Somebody will hit a big clothesline. It might be Clothesline City, like Gorilla would say. A golden opportunity for this guy. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Finding that something extra deep inside. Adrenaline can do wonders. I say that, a lot. So, you always have, and then I like to make outside references too. Like, I like to make references about stuff that I like. So if there's a big monster heel like a Watts and he's just moving forward and teeing off on somebody, or so, heel's trying to scurry or get away, you might hear me say something like, getting away from Watts is like trying to get away from Jason Voorhees at Camp Crystal Lake, or trying to get away from Michael Myers in Haddonfield. Because I love horror movies, and so I might make heavy metal references. I say vulgar display of power a lot when there's just an atrocity, and that's a Pantera reference. So I've got my go-tos, and I've got my things that I like to say, and a lot of it, like I said, punching at ghosts was something that Jesse had said decades before that just stuck with me. So I borrow from what I loved in the past, sometimes whether I realize it or I don't.
Love it. So where can we follow you online, Todd?
Twitter at Todd Keneley. I'm on Facebook as well. Just search Todd Keneley. Instagram at @TKeneley. And I always do my best to get back to the fans and try and be as active as I can be.
Dustin, same question. Where can we find you?
You can follow me at Dustin Starr, and be sure to follow Championship Wrestling presented by Pro Shingle at CW30 Wrestling. And if you join us on YouTube every Saturday at noon, you most likely, a lot of times, you can talk to Todd Keneley during the show. And thanks for coming into the chats. I mean, I think people really get a kick out of knowing the guy that we're listening to. Like when the wrestlers, like Anthony Idol is one of the popular guys, and Danny Limelight, they like to come in and watch their matches. But for you to be there and to give the insight on what's going on in there, and also to tell some funny jokes too.
It's great just to interact with the fan base and rewatch the matches. A lot of times I haven't seen for a while, and it's a blast. Yeah, it's fun for fans that haven't taken part in that live chat. On the presentation of Championship Wrestling CW30. you should do it because it's a blast. And there will be, Danny Limelight Rivera has been on there. Like you said, Anthony Idol's on there a lot. A lot of the talent will stop by. And I'll always try, even if it's like the last 10 minutes, if I'm doing something, I'll try and get on there at least for something. But it brings a whole new insight. And it's one of those things that we're doing to bring our fan base closer than ever to the product. And I think it's important.
In the coming weeks,
Absolutely it is.
the next 4 weeks, I believe, are all different programming. I think all the shows will be different. So the Hollywood show will be different than the Memphis show. So it'll give us a reason to watch both programs even more so than what we already do.
Yes.
So,
yeah, super fun. Also, Todd, thanks for you always pipe in on these live recordings as well. You're always in the chat, bringing things up, and everyone usually has something to say in response. So just as much as the Saturday shows, it's your presence on these has been very much welcome.
My pleasure. I'm like these, baby. I'm everywhere you want to be.
Man, I think Dustin mentioned it before that coming up, we're doing some best ofs. So for those this weekend, we're tuning into Championship Wrestling. You'll see the best of the Red Carpet Rumble. And next week, Todd had mentioned a Scorpio Sky versus Willie Mack match. That one of their matches will be featured next week as we visit the United Television title. So for those who have been following the program, we're going to dig a little bit further into archives, see things that maybe people haven't seen before. So for everyone watching at home, make sure to tune in for the next couple of weeks, especially. If not over the air, check it out on Fight. Check it out on our YouTube page, United Wrestling Network. And make sure to follow us on Instagram. Same thing, United Wrestling Network. Facebook, United Wrestling Network. Follow us on Twitter @United Wrestling. And shout out to everyone who networks with United. Fight on!